Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another year of fantasy football. My name is Scott Morganroth, along with Ryan Skolrud, and we're adding a third man in the booth, Rick Curti. How you doing, Rick? What's going on?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
All right, part of the three-man booth. Ryan, glad to have you back. Of course, we're going to get you involved in other sports, because you are what?
Skull King Sports.
So you don't do just football anymore. You do it all, right?
We do as much as we can.
Attaboy. Well, I'll tell you what, we looking forward to bringing you on in a lot of different ways, and I'm sure by the end of Salton, we'll all figure out what that Seattle Kraken thing is out there, which I'll still probably take me forever to figure out, but at any rate, we'll talk about fantasy football, and let's go out there and talk about fantasy football. Glad to have you back for another year, Ryan.
It's good to be back. So, well, really to get it started off, not so much fantasy related, but just NFL in general. We've got a couple of news things coming up. DeAndre Hopkins has now signed an extension with the Arizona Cardinals. It was a 2-year extension, which makes him there's some confusion about how this actually goes. So it was a 2-year extension, but he still has 3 years left on his current deal, including this year. But those 2 years alone, at the end of his current deal, will actually make him, I think he said the highest paid non-QB in the league. I believe it's a 2-year deal worth $54 million, so $27 million a year. And so if you combine that with the 3 years left on his contract right now, it actually manages to average out to, I want to say about $19.5 million a year over 5 years. So, I mean, considering it's DeAndre Hopkins and just how spectacular he has been so far throughout his career, he's definitely, I think, worth that kind of money. That'll be interesting to see if he's, if something happens, to see if he's, still worth that kind of money at the end of this deal for the last 2 years. But as of right now, the overall 5-year deal now, his overall 5-year contract, I think still looks pretty good considering some of these other guys who are going to be getting other deals coming up soon. So,
well, for a guy to have an opportunity to play with Kyler Murray, and don't forget Larry Fitzgerald is still with the Cardinals, I think Larry Fitzgerald will be a very serviceable player for the Cardinals too. And having Hopkins around could potentially, extend Larry Fitzgerald's career and just another dangerous weapon for sure. I'll be curious to see what that does for Larry Fitzgerald.
As far as Larry Fitzgerald, really, he's really kind of morphed into like a slot receiver, and more of a possession guy. He doesn't have the speed that he used to, obviously. He still has phenomenal hands. He has actually, I see the stat pop up every year. Larry Fitzgerald has more tackles in his career than he does drop passes. And so that's just one of those killer stats. Yeah, I think he has like 14 career tackles, obviously off of interceptions where he's had to make the tackle on the defender. It's like 14 interceptions and like 9 career drops or 10 career drops or something like that. So, it's a ridiculous stats. But he's obviously more of a possession guy now at this point in his career. But with Kyler Murray and his mobility, adding someone like DeAndre Hopkins, I think Hopkins having a legit number 2 and number 3 in having both Fitzgerald as well as Christian Kirk, who can also run a lot of those deep routes like DeAndre Hopkins can, I think is only going to be mean good things for Hopkins. I think it's going to be easier to force defenses to have to single cover him because of Fitzgerald's ability to get loose underneath and Christian Kirk's ability to go over the top. I think that's going to provide some decent opportunities. Now, the one thing that's going to decrease for DeAndre Hopkins is going to be his targets, simply because DeAndre Hopkins is not going to be relied upon for 180 some odd targets, or 160. I think it's 165 targets is what he has averaged over the last 3 to 4 years. He's not going to need that many targets from Kyler Murray because there are so many more weapons available to the Cardinals and with how they run their offense. So his targets will go down, but I think that it's possible that he could keep the same amount of yards because of his efficiency and his ability to get to move the ball after the catch. So,
well, when we talk about DeAndre Hopkins, he's a first-team All-Pro in each of the last 3 seasons. He's established himself among the NFL's elite wide receivers in 7 campaigns with Houston. The 28-year-old led the NFL in receiving touchdowns in 2017 and owns 5 1,000-yard seasons. Here's the thing when you talk about his contract, and here's the thing that we all know about NFL contracts. It's the guaranteed money. He'll reportedly receive $42.75 million in guaranteed money. So that, to me, is what you look at. And getting back to what you were talking about, the value of the contract, he has 5 years and $94 million remaining on the deal he originally signed with the Houston Texans before the shocking trade was made to Arizona in March. So, a lot of numbers to throw around, but in the end, you talk about the guaranteed money. So, Rick, let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins. Is he a better fit in Arizona than he was with Houston?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he has a coach that wants him, for one thing. He has an organization that wants him. I'm still confused why Bill O'Brien would give away such a great player like DeAndre Hopkins for pretty much nothing. That's still a head scratcher for me. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, he's got he's got a great quarterback in Kyler Murray. And I think he won't be like the main target no more. And I think having Larry Fitzgerald there, the veteran, I think they'll work well together. So the Arizona Cardinals look like an exciting team for the 2020 NFL season.
Yeah, Ryan, if you had to guess for the Cardinals, how many wins do you think they're good for in 2020?
I don't know. That's tough to say. I mean, I don't have their full schedule up in front of me. I mean, I can tell you right off the bat that they're going to have a tough time with San Francisco. Right. I think they're still going to have a tough time with Seattle. I think Seattle and Arizona, no matter how good or bad either one of those teams are, they usually split 1-1. And if one team wins both games, it's usually come down to like a last-second field goal on both of them. So I can see them splitting with the Seahawks. I can see them splitting 1-1 with all 3 of the other teams in that division, and then from there, it just kind of depends on what the rest of their calendar looks like. I can see if I can pull it up real quick.
Well, I'm looking at their schedule right now. Some of the notable games you have. We'll just talk about mainly the month of September. They're at the 49ers. I believe they have Washington on the week 2. And then the Lions, week 3, they host the Lions. I'm not sure we'll talk about the Lions a little bit later in the broadcast. And then they get the Cowboys, or at the Cowboys, which could be a very interesting game there. Panthers.
Yeah, look at their schedule now. I mean, they've got some what would be considered cupcake games. I guess you could say with the Washington football team. The Panthers, we're not sure what that team is going to look like with how many changes they've made to the defense. New coaching staff. They've got the Jets, the Dolphins. Got a couple of top games with the Bills, the Patriots. Don't know what the Eagles are going to look like this year. So, I mean, I could see them being an 8-win team.
Yeah, that's
no problem. So,
yeah, I was thinking about that too. So, all right, well, let's go on to another guy who's had more lives than Morris, and I'm referring to Kareem Hunt. How about that? We got a cat analogy here. Kareem Hunt. Okay, talking cats, folks, and now we're talking about the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, this extension was interesting to me because they signed him for 2 years. I want to say it was 2 years, $13 million, I believe, with 8.5 guaranteed, somewhere in that range. Yeah. So they've got him under their control for the next 3 years, which is interesting considering they also have Nick Chubb. And again, we have a new GM, new head coach. It could be that that Stefanski believes that in his offense that Kareem Hunt is the better fit. I know that last year being the offense coordinator for the Vikings, that they utilized. I mean, they basically leaned on Dalvin Cook for most of the season. Compared to the year before, when they were throwing the ball all over the field to Diggs and to Thielen. So I think the fact that they were willing to really establish the run and really sit on the running back, and now they're extending Kareem Hunt, it really makes me wonder whether or not they want to keep with Nick Chubb or they may try to trade him. I just don't see them paying that same kind of contract to two different running backs in that offense, even with the type of offense that I think Stefanski is going to run, where it's going to be very running back heavy.
Yeah,
I just don't see the need to pay both of them that much. So I could see in this next off season a possible trade of Nick Chubb before he goes into the final year of his rookie deal.
Yeah, but you got two variables here. Oh, look at the contracts: $13.5 million with an $8.5 million guarantee. Because of COVID-19, the salary cap is going to go down anyhow because of lack of revenues. But here's the intangible factor, and that's this: if for some reason or another Kareem Hunt relapses because the 25-year-old found himself in trouble this past offseason after police found marijuana in Hunt's possession after pulling him over for speeding. That's the variable. So I'm wondering if he's more of an insurance policy or a factor. But you're right. I don't see where you can afford two. But it's $8.5 million and $13.5 million, that much money for a running back if you think that he's a multi-versatile back. That's the thing I'm not sure about. What's your take on that? Is that a lot of money?
I think it's a lot of money to me for a backup running back.
Okay.
Or for your running back number two. That's what concerns me is with how much they're paying, especially knowing that the salary cap is going to be a little bit low over the next couple of years. The fact that they're willing to pay him that much to be the backup, that's what makes this deal interesting to me. I mean, it could be that they're going to pay both of them the same amount and use them evenly and have the entire offense centered around Hunt and Chubb. But I have a hard time seeing that. So, again, because of this, I could see them drafting another running back coming up this next year and, maybe dealing Chubb, or if, maybe some things aren't necessarily working out with having Hunt, maybe trading him in his contract as well.
Interesting. Rick, what's your take on that?
Well, if you want to talk about confusion and things that are kind of head scratchers, we all know we're talking about the Cleveland Browns, the organization that just seems to do things that, they scratch your head. So maybe they have some plans for them. Maybe it's just an emergency just in case. But, the Browns are the Browns, and, they seem to get new coaches and new GMs and everything like that. So, we'll see what happens with them. I see them. If they win like 6 games this year, I think Stefanski has done a great job as a head coach. So I kind of see them going like 6-10, but I never have any high expectations for the Browns.
Yeah, if anybody's on the chopping block, we know it's Baker Mayfield, right, Ryan?
Yeah, no kidding. I think that this year could be better for Mayfield. I think having last year, just the coaching situation, everything was just a poop show. I think was the best way to put it. And so I think that if they think they actually have the quarterback that the head coach they need in Kevin Stefanski, who can be a stable force and a stable voice in the ear of Mayfield, I think that this could be a much better year for him than the previous year. Also, I think that was, I believe it was Greg Williams 2 years ago during his rookie year, who was the head coach during all of that rookie year, was a very stabilizing guy. It always has kind of been considered that, very defensive minded, and they kept everything simple for Mayfield. I think if they go back to that this year and not overcomplicate the offense. I think Stefanski is going to be good at making sure it's more of a little bit simpler offense. Utilizing the running back slot. I think that'll open up things for Mayfield to use all of the options that he has in the pass game in Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry. They just added Austin Hooper. They still have David Njoku. And so there are so many options that they'll be able to use. I think if they focus the offense on the running back, I think that's going to take some pressure off of Mayfield and allow him to actually use his talent and use his arm a little bit more.
Well, he has a very capable backup in Case Keenum, and I think Case Keenum has some familiarity with Stefanski. Is that correct, I believe?
Correct. I believe Keenum was the one a few years ago before Cousins signed there. That Case Keenum was the one that took him to the playoffs with Stefanski as one of the assistant coaches. So
yeah, one of the more common things that we're going to talk about throughout the broadcast is familiarity factor. This being one of them, and of course I'll make some references later on when we talk about the Lions and Adrian Peterson as well. So I think that Case Keenum is definitely a suitable backup for Baker Mayfield. If anything, stabilizes the quarterback room. And again, Stefanski has familiarity with him, so I think the Browns might be all right there. But Baker Mayfield at some point has to get it right, and hopefully Kevin Stefanski is the guy that will allow him to get there. So let's go on to James Conner. Connor, you say he's declared a bell cow by Mike Tomlin. Please give me an explanation about that.
So basically, Mike Tomlin talked about how they have a lot of talent in their running back room. They have a lot of diversity in the types of roles that their running backs can play. Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland are more the kind of the bulldozer type running backs. Jalen Samuels is very much the kind of guy that's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. In college, Jalen Samuels was a tight end slash fullback that was only used in the pass game, and so you have a lot of that kind of diversity. But then you've got James Conner, who the year that Le'Veon Bell decided to hold out for the entire year, James Conner was an absolute sensation for as long as he was healthy. Able to, I think he was running for 4.5 yards a carry, was doing a good job catching the ball out of the backfield. I mean, he was, I want to say through the first 6 or 7 weeks before he got injured, he was, I want to say, the running back 3 or 4, maybe running back 5. But just he has the ability to be that kind of a back, a bell cow back that's going to be out there 3 downs. And so Tomlin said that they're not necessarily looking to spell James Conner a whole bunch unless they absolutely have to. So they're not going to use him first 2 downs, then bring in Jalen Samuels to catch something on 3rd downs, or bring in Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland on short downs. They are going to use James Conner in every situation unless he absolutely needs a break. And so he is going to be in any situation where he is on the field. He is a possibility of being used in that situation. So I think for me, it ups his fantasy value a little bit, just knowing that they have that sort of confidence in him. The problem is it knocks it back down when we know the injury history that he's had, dealing with stingers, with hamstring issues, and so I know that the Steelers have been very careful this offseason, not overusing him in training camp and in workouts and everything. So I think that was part of what was going on in a lot of discussions about the fact that he may not be used as a 3-down back, that they're going to spread the love in that running back room. And Tomlin basically said, no, we were just kind of saving him so we didn't wear him out for the season. Once the season goes, it's all his. So I like James Conner when he's healthy.
So my question,
I love him on my team when he's healthy. It's just a matter of how long will he stay healthy.
My question to you is, how much does not having a preseason benefit James Conner, let alone a lot of the players in the league? Because obviously this is the first time we've ever had no preseason at all. And I know we'll get to other examples of it, but, less wear and tear, fewer padded workouts, obviously enough to make sure the physicality aspect of it's covered. But, again, we're talking about wear and tear, especially at the running back position.
I'm going to go the exact opposite. Here's my thing.
Okay.
And I've heard a lot of former players talk about this. I think it could honestly be a little bit of an issue negatively.
Really? Okay.
And here's why. One of the guys on local radio here in Seattle used to play linebacker for the Seahawks and the Denver Broncos back in the late 80s and early 90s. And one of the things that he said is you can't simulate game speed hard hitting with pads. You can't simulate that. You either do it or you run 3/4 speed. And so when you finally get up to full game speed, it's going to be completely different than you were in 3/4 speed. Even if you've been playing in the league for 10 years, just going from 3/4 speed, not fully going at it against your teammates, to then going into the arena against another team and going all out. We could see a few more injuries early in the season than we may be used to. And it could be that those injuries that happened the first few weeks were just the ones that normally would happen during preseason games. I think that a lot of those injuries and everything will just be delayed and happen in the first few weeks of the season instead of during the actual preseason. As far as wear and tear goes, I mean, yes, that could sort of be the case in terms of not having as much wear and tear in the preseason. But most starters aren't playing all that much in the preseason. I mean, you look, first preseason game they're playing a series, maybe two.
Right.
Second preseason game they're playing through the first quarter. Third preseason game they might be playing a full half. Fourth preseason game they might get the very first series. After that, it's all the fourth and fifth string guys who are trying to make the team. So I'm not buying the lack of wear and tear from the preseason. I think if anything, it could be more detrimental just from the lack of full speed game experience going straight into the season.
Now let me go back to a time when you were not even born, and I was covering the United States Football League back in the early 80s. They had an 18-game schedule with no preseason games. You didn't even know what kind of a team you had for the first 2 or 3 games to begin with. So you kind of wonder what kind of play you're going to see the first couple weeks, item number one. And number two, you have to get rid of the cobwebs out because a lot of these guys haven't played any type of football for a while. They didn't have OTAs or nothing throughout this year. So, yeah, there's no question the year. But I remember back in my USFL days, back in the 80s, it was definitely an interesting animal. And this situation somewhat reminds me of this. At what point or another are we going to find out what these teams are really like? Is it week 3 or 4 or 1 and 2? How relevant are they? How sharp can they be early on? I know that's a lot of questions rolled into one. Rick, why don't you get involved with this, and then Ryan can go ahead and answer that. I want your opinion on the USFL. I don't know how much you followed it back in the day, but had an 18-game schedule, no preseason games, and then all of a sudden you began to find out what a team was like as time progressed.
Well, it's really going to be a challenge because of no preseason, especially if you're a new coach or you got a lot of new players. So it's going to be very interesting. I used to love the USFL. I remember, with Jim Kelly and Steve Young and all that. It was a great league. But it was difficult because it took maybe, like you said, 2 or 3 games for them to find out what kind of team they had, and then you got to realize you have to build some kind of chemistry. So it's going to be difficult this season for like the new coaches like Stefanowski from the Browns and a lot of new players. So it's definitely going to be a challenge. But this is what this whole year is about. It's about challenges. So. We'll see how it happens, but I think like the first 2 or 3 games in the NFL, you're not gonna see a lot of good play, especially with no preseason. It usually takes about 2 or 3 games for the chemistry to come in, for the rushiness to leave. So I think the first couple of games, they're not going to be pretty, but after that, I think they'll settle down and you'll see some type of chemistry.
All right, Ryan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that I honestly think it's going to be, we'll really figure out what teams are about in week 3 or 4. I think it's probably going to be week 4. We'll know for sure what teams are able to do. And then even then I go back and look at last year where, the Bengals started off, was it 3-1? And we're just absolutely burning teams up, and our offense was on fire the first 4 games, then they all fell off a cliff. So, for me, I think that honestly, I think game 4 we'll really know what teams are. By that point, we'll have seen kind of what type of game plan teams are actually coming up with, how they're using their personnel. So, I think game 4 is probably the most likely spot where we can okay, now we have a pretty solid idea of what we're looking for from each team as they go into a matchup.
Right now, a guy you're all too familiar with is J.D. McKissick. He's the number 1 running back on the depth chart with Adrian Peterson gone with the Washington football team. I know you know a lot about J.D. McKissick. I know the Lions had him for a period of time. Give us your assessment on J.D. McKissick and what he's going to do out in D.C.
I think McKissick he's a solid receiving back. Really, to me, he's very similar to what they have in Antoine Gibson, who they just drafted, or Antonio Gibson. I think maybe this is just a way for them to kind of ease the rookie in. They dropped Adrian Peterson, so right now their backfield is McKissick, Bryce Love, who still they don't think is quite at the full strength after the ACL tear during his senior year, where he still got drafted and they helped him work through it. So he's still working on getting to full game speed. Then it's Antonio Gibson, who's a rookie out of Memphis, who a lot of people say he can be a 3-down type of back. To me, he lacks. Last time I saw him, just looking on game tape, he looked a little bit on the skinny side for me in terms of being a 3-down type of back. But depending on how much weight he's put on in this offseason and muscle, I could see that happening. And then they've got Peyton Barber, who, for me, the best way to describe Peyton Barber is a plotter. He wasn't able to do anything really in Tampa Bay. Now, mind you, that offensive line couldn't run block for anything. All they could manage to do was pass block. But I think that Barber will probably get some short down work. I think that McKissick is the number 1 on the depth chart honorarily. I think maybe he's kind of done the best over these last couple of weeks in camp. And I think they want to kind of ease in Love if he gets any playing time because of still coming off the injury. He hasn't had any game experience in a year and a half basically when he was with Stanford. And then like I said, Barber getting some short down work and then easing in the rookie in Antonio Gibson. So I think that honestly, McKissick may be the number 1 on the depth chart officially, but I think it's going to be a full-on running back by committee across all 4 of them.
Interesting.
At least for the first couple weeks.
All right, let's go on to the guy you just mentioned, Adrian Peterson. He could have a role in Detroit week 1. Darrell Bevel, once again, worked with him in Minnesota with the Vikings. Familiarity factor. Remember I talked about that earlier in the broadcast. I'm going to mention it again. How effective will Adrian Peterson be in Detroit? Rick, why don't you give me your take on Adrian Peterson? Now, bear in mind, Adrian Peterson has 1,053 yards to go before he surpasses Barry Sanders on the depth chart. And being a former Oklahoma running back, there's some Oklahoma running backs, whether it's Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, that have gone through the Detroit Lions. But how effective, Rick, do you think Adrian Peterson will be in Detroit? The Lions certainly need him. And they've tried a lot of different things at running backs. And let's not lose sight of the big intangible. Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn are under fire to try to get this team competitive. They got off to a nice start with Matthew Stafford, but when Stafford went down, so did the season. Rick, your take on Adrian Peterson in the Motor City?
Well, he's definitely a name, so people will pay to. Well, they're not going to have any fans, but I think it gets the Detroit Lions fans some excitement. He's not the same Adrian Peterson. He's not going to rush for 2,000 yards. He's not going to rush for over 250 yards in a game. But I mean, he's a name, and they need somebody, so it could work out. But like I said, he's just a name right now. He's not the same player as he is, and he's there to probably just extend his career right now, and I think it'll be good for Patricia and for Quinn, who are, like you said, are under fire. The Lions don't do anything this year. Patricia, to me, is gone, and they'll probably have to do another rebuild. But I mean, for them, picking a veteran like that with a lot of experience. I mean, to me, it's a good fit. It just depends how he can stay healthy and how productive he can be.
Yeah, but Rick, bear in mind, Adrian Peterson, right? Ryan had 898 yards with Washington last year, so it's not like he was a non-productive player. And when Darius Geis went down, he actually had 2 productive years and revitalized his career out in Washington, right, Ryan? So I don't think you're just bringing in a guy based on name recognition, because you don't stay in this business unless there is a degree of productivity, let alone the familiarity factor. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
I think that Peterson could provide a little bit of a spark to that offense. I mean, you look at what they have had the last few years. I mean, it was celebrated last year when Kerryon Johnson got the first 100-yard rushing game from a Detroit Lion in was it like 5 or 6 years?
Yeah.
And so I think that the style that Adrian Peterson runs could be beneficial to the offense for the Detroit Lions. I think part of the reason that he was brought in the first place, I know that DeAndre Swift is struggling a little bit staying healthy.
Right.
At one point, the Lions were looking like they were going to go into week 1 with only Kerryon Johnson and Ty Johnson as their 2 running backs, 2 main running backs to use. So I think that part of the reason to bring in AP was just for health and depth reasons. But I mean, even just the quote from Patricia is that, kind of we'll see on how he's used, but the expectations that he gets plenty of run off the bat. So I think that AP is going to be the main, kind of the main first and second down type runner. And then Kerryon Johnson, who I think his skill set more matches that pass catching third down back type. I think that they could provide a decent little 1-2 punch until DeAndre Swift can prove to stay healthy and actually be an NFL caliber running back.
Well, both Scarborough was put on the injured reserve, so that obviously the signing is not bad there. Again, I'll go back to Darrell Bevel. When you work with a guy before, it doesn't hurt. But yeah, the Lions definitely. Kerryon Johnson to me had the potential. Definitely is great, but again, he has to stay healthy. There's no question about that, and he hasn't been able to do it. The Lions have tried over the years. They've had Kevin Smith for a while. Javid Best got concussion, and you had Amir Abdullah was on there for a while.
He just couldn't hold on to the ball.
Right? Yeah, no, he couldn't. So it's not like they haven't tried. It's just they haven't. It's just they've had bad luck at that position. So we'll see what happens with AP. Does he get 1,053 yards this year? No. Okay. But if they can get 500 to 700, 800 yards out of him and he becomes a contributor in Detroit, I think they'd be pleased with that, providing that, DeAndre Swift is productive as well as Kerryon Johnson remains healthy. We'll stay at the running back position and talk about Leonard Fournette. You say he could have a role in week 1, and he's going to have a backfield that consists of LaShawn McCoy, fresh off a Super Bowl ring with the Kansas City Chiefs, and we know that Ronald Jones is the top of the depth chart. So, and I want to get to some comments that Fournette made about the quarterbacks with the Jaguars. Before we do that, let's stay on point about Leonard Fournette's role with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, Fournette's going to be, I think he's going to be by week 3, he's going to be the number 1 in that offense. Ronald Jones did not show a whole lot last year. You've got who's the Deshaun Vaughn, who hasn't really done much in camp. I think that Fournette, in this first week, I mean, looking at the quote from Bruce Arians, he said that Fournette will have a solid role in week 1 against the Saints. He's a bright guy, picked up the offense quickly. Obviously, he can't do everything, but he's going to be used situationally. I think those situations are going to be first and second down. I think that Fournette proved last year that he can also catch the ball out of the backfield. I believe he had 70, 75 catches out of the backfield last year. So he can be used as a 3-down back. So I think it'll just be a couple of weeks before he eventually takes over the backfield there. And so, yeah, I think that Fournette will. It'll be a little sketchy the first couple of weeks. Just, again, we haven't seen – there's no preseason games. We don't know how he's going to get involved with the offense for sure. But I think after, say 2 to 3 weeks, we will definitely have a solid grasp of what Leonard Fournette's going to be able to do in the Tampa Bay offense.
All right, Rick, what are your thoughts about Leonard Fournette with the Buccaneers? I can tell you right now, I saw him the last couple of years in Jacksonville. I love Leonard Fournette as a running back. I really do. I saw the type of mauler that he is, and he's been able to gain some his ability to catch out of the backfield. So I think the Buccaneers got a steal there. And I'll get to the quarterback. So, Rick, give me your thoughts on Leonard Fournette.
Well, they definitely needed something for running back. They've got, he covered everything during this offseason, including getting, of course, Tom Brady. So, we'll see what happens with Leonard. Leonard's got all the talent in the world. He could be one of the great running backs right now in the NFL, but he's always getting himself in trouble, either off the field or things that he says, and eventually he soured in Jacksonville, and now he's going to Tampa Bay. So I think having someone like Tom Brady, a veteran right there, hopefully he can maybe just make him focus on football. And I think he could be very productive in this Tampa Bay offense if he can keep all the personal stuff to himself and just focus on football. But I think it was a great pickup for Tampa Bay, and they needed someone at running back. And to me, Fournette is a great player, and he's got all the talent in the world. And it just depends on if he can just leave all the distractions outside.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they had issues, were the distractions within the front office that ultimately led to the amount of drama that saw him leave. But then again, lately, in Jacksonville, there seems to be a lot of problems because of the fact that they've let a lot of great players. Fournette's just one of a long list of players that ended up leaving, and that's why the Jaguars are what they are now. Fournette goes ahead and mentions that after 3 frustrating seasons, he's elated with the prospect of finally playing with a good backfield partner in Tom Brady. Now, again, I love what this article comes from Jack Brown. And he says that Blake Bortles should stop reading here. This is really interesting, okay? Who wouldn't be elated to play with Tom Brady? But when you think about this and put it in perspective, he isn't that far out of line. Now, again, Gardner Minshew gets an incomplete grade, so I'm not going to really get critical on him. But Cody Kessler, Nick Foles' experiment in Jacksonville did not work out very well for sure. So, but with the Bucs, like Rick said, he is going to be paired with Tom Brady, arguably the greatest quarterback in NFL history and the league's most accomplished player. But when you have receiving weapons like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski at Brady's disposal, the Bucs are less likely going to rely on their running game. I think it's probably more sparingly, but you still need to have a good, suitable running back. So I don't think he'll have as much wear and tear going with the Buccaneers. So, what are your thoughts about his comments, Ryan, about the fact that we realized he didn't have that great of a quarterback, but comparing him up against Brady? Of course, he has an offensive-minded coach, as you alluded to, with Bruce Arians.
Well, let's be honest. The quarterbacks that he has had in Jacksonville, Bortles was hot garbage. in my opinion,
Right.
who managed to have a semi-decent year 1 year where he was able to run the offense well enough that was able to get the team to the playoffs. He had a couple years before that where his statistics were great, but they were all garbage time statistics where they were well out of it by the time he was throwing touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Now you could say that part of it was the defense, and why they lost so many games. But Bortles was not a very good quarterback, in my opinion. You talk about Nick Foles is a decent quarterback, but just didn't work out, and it didn't help that he had a broken collarbone in week 1. And then Gardner Minshew, I think the verdict is still out, like you said, and we give him an incomplete grade. But going then to Tom Brady, who again is the most accomplished quarterback in terms of in terms of rings, in terms of playoff performance, and everything. It's kind of an absurd statement to not say that he's the best quarterback you've ever worked with. So I think that really Fournette is in a great situation now. It's probably it's by far the best situation he's ever been in as a player, and I think that Tampa Bay should have a really good season this year.
No doubt about it. All right, let's stay in the division. New Orleans Saints, Alvin Kamara is extremely close to signing a new extension. We all know how important Alvin Kamara is to the New Orleans Saints, but you got to realize, though, that the Saints window could be closing. I know Drew Brees is down another year or two. You have Jameis Winston as the backup quarterback. Rick, what are your thoughts about Alvin Kamara being close to signing an extension with the Saints?
Well, I think it's great for the Saints because he's a great player. He's one of the best players in the NFL, but I think that window's kind of closed down on him with trying to win a Super Bowl because you got Brees, who's 41, and I think this is probably going to be his last year. And so that window's kind of closing short for him. But for the Saints organization, I think it's a home run. They need to sign someone like that. And like I said, we'll see what happens, and we'll see. It all depends who they can get after Brees, because I think this will be his last season.
Well, I have a gut feeling that, believe it or not, if Brees does step away, Jameis Winston, with a little TLC working under Sean Payton, could be the heir apparent. I think that's probably one of the reasons he signed over there, knowing the potential probability being what it is. It could definitely occur. So, I don't know. I like the succession plan there with Jameis Winston in place, right, Ryan? Being able to eventually succeed.
Yeah, I think I like Jameis Winston there as the backup, and him being. I think that Jameis Winston is talented. I think that he is still raw, even after 4 or 5 years or whatever so far in the league. I do like the fact, I think it'll help. It'll be interesting to see how much his eye surgery has helped him. I used to make fun of one of my coworkers because I used to call him Jameis because he would always he'd look at me from down the aisle in the grocery store, and he'd always tip his head back and squint his eyes as hard as he could. So I'd always call him Jameis because of that. And so it'll be interesting to see how much the eye surgery has helped him. If maybe he can actually see that there's more than one color shirt out there. He's throwing the ball. But I think he's a solid. I think he'll be a solid backup. It'll be interesting to see how he can fit into that offense. But overall, I do think that it's possible that the window is closing a little bit on the Saints, especially considering Drew Brees, just the legend that he is, working possibly towards last year or two of his career.
Yeah, I like Alvin Kamara potentially signing an extension, but I think the Saints' biggest mistake really was when they let Mark Ingram get away. I thought that Kamara and Ingram were a really good 1-2 punch. And Michael Thomas is a great wideout, but the list goes on and on. Mark Ingram, he should be a Saint. I think that was a major mistake in New Orleans. and obviously he's a factor with the Ravens. What are your thoughts about that, Ryan?
Sorry, I missed that. You cut out just a little bit on that last little bit.
That's okay. Mark Ingram, when the Saints let him get away, I thought that was a major mistake. I thought that Kamara and Ingram were a formidable 1-2 punch.
Yeah, I think so. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a 1-2 punch they can have, in the backfield. I've never been a big fan of Latavius Murray here with the Saints. I think that Ingram has obviously been pretty good. Has been pretty good this last year. Even as he's getting, I believe that he's over 30 now. So it'll be interesting to see how he is able to carry that on with J.K. Dobbins in the backfield with him as well.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think Jameis Winston is actually going to ultimately take Breeze's place, and that the Saints window is closing now. The last point I want to get to comes from our own David Levin. And I love David's headline. Okay, this is great. And I was actually in Jacksonville when they made the selection. So here's David Levin's headline for the South Florida Tribune. Will the national media let Gardner Minshew play football? They're talking about Trevor Lawrence being with the Jaguars a year from now. Maybe that's definitely something to be looking at. But during the current, I know that I was at the draft in Jacksonville at the stadium, and they were raving about Minshew. Well, now he doesn't have Foles looking over his shoulder, and Gardner's their folk hero there. But first of all, Rick, what do you think? Will the national media let Gardner Minshew play football?
Well, I'm sorry, you cut off a little bit.
That's right. Will the national media let Gardner Minshew play football?
Minshew will play,
read that.
Minshew this season?
Yeah, I mean, no, in other words, when you read the headline, will the national media let Gardner Minshew play football, meaning are they going to sit there and think he's a nothing, or are they going to give him a chance to at least succeed? Right, Ryan? Is that how you interpret that headline? Or how do you interpret that headline?
The way that I interpret that is, with Jacksonville, is the national media actually going to think that Jacksonville is safe with Gardner Minshew, or are they going to flop and fold so that they can try to get Trevor Lawrence for next year? Right. I think they let him play. I think that Minshew could have a decent year this year. I think he would have had a better year if Fournette was still there as the as the running back. I'm not so sure that with Armstead on IR for COVID, it looked like he's not going to be able to play for a little bit. And they've got James Johnson, I believe, as their starting running back now, with Devine Zigbo as their number 2 and Chris Thompson catch the ball in the backfield. It's not exactly a promising running back situation. And usually you kind of need a decent running back situation to help a young quarterback be able to play well and be able to hit his targets in the passing game. So it's not looking great for Gardner Minshew, but I think that if Minshew can put up some decent numbers, I don't think they'll fall far enough to be able to get Trevor Lawrence next year.
Now I hear they brought Devontae Freeman in, but they weren't able to work out a contract. And as David points out in his story, that the Jaguars aren't void of talent with DJ Chark and an underrated wide receiver room at his disposal. So, and David makes a really good point in this thing where the running backs are pedestrian at best. And I like the way that he goes ahead and mentions that. You talk about a guy like Jay Gruden might be the best acquisition the team made to help the future of this franchise. I'm wondering if Jay Gruden may be the next coach of the Jaguars if Doug Marrone gets run out the door, because we know that Jay Gruden's a good offensive mind that I thought got a really bad deal over with Washington. So, Rick, do you understand this a lot better now that we've probably tried to interpret it a little bit for you? Okay, so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not really sold on Minshew, to be quite honest. I think he's just a lot of talk, and and like I said, he gets an incomplete grade, and so they're gonna have to let him play to see what they have. They're gonna have to see if they have a starting quarterback, because they have totally floundered, in trying to get quarterbacks with Bortles, and then with Foles that didn't work out. So it's just they're gonna have to play them. They're gonna have to and see what they have, and if they have a decent year, they're not going to fall too far back to get Trevor Lawrence, who I think would be to me, the number one pick. I don't think they're going to tank or anything like that just to get Trevor Lawrence. So they're going to have to see what Minshew has and see if he's all the talk and all the flair. He's got all that. He's got the charisma. The question is he a starting quarterback? Is he a franchise quarterback? That we won't know till they start playing in the 2020 season.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, that's the whole key to this whole dynamic is the fact that you wonder, okay, whether or not Minshew will get an opportunity, right, Ryan, to be able to prove what he's able to do. You know what I mean? Without the extra pressure out there. You with me? Well, all right, Ryan, we got you back. Okay, anyways, getting back to, I guess the question is will Minshew be able to get past the scrutiny without all the extra drama that goes with it? Because David Levin goes on and says that if the Jaguars are as horrendous as some predict, this will become a different topic within the first half of 2020. Anticipating the coaching change will change in January, and the front office will also after that. All the Jaguars can hope for is that they have a lot of draft capital, but it's one thing to have draft capital. The question is, what can you really do with that?
Yeah, for me, I'm not a big fan of Jay Gruden as a head coach. I think he's a very good offensive coordinator. I think if something were to happen to Marone, it's possible that they could go with Jay Gruden. I think, honestly, to me, I think it would be a mistake. I think there are some guys that just aren't cut out to be head coaches. I think Jay Gruden is one of them. I think he could be a solid offensive coordinator. I think he's a good offensive mind, and to have him in that sort of position would be great. Like I said, if something falls out, I think it would be better for the Jaguars to go a different direction and keep Gruden as their offensive coordinator. But that's just it.
Well, I don't know. A lot of things are possible. Well, pretty good show here today, guys. Appreciate everything. All right, so with that said, Rick, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you? I'll go over my things as well. Then Ryan can do it as well. So go ahead, Rick, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Well, my website is at www.charlottebats.com. Contact me on my website at cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB. We're also on Charlotte Bats Baseball on Facebook. We're also on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. I'm also on LinkedIn under Rick Curti. And I'm also on Twitter at Charlotte Bats Baseball. And you can contact me on any of those social media websites.
All right, Ryan, you're next.
All right, well, you can get a hold of us on our website at skullkingsports.com. We are on Facebook in multiple different places. You can follow us at Skull King Sports. We also have an NFL fantasy football page where we talk, post all of our NFL news, fantasy football news. We have multiple groups that you can find us to talk and discuss multiple different sports, from football to basketball, Major League Baseball, racing, Formula One, all that. We're also on Instagram, Skull King Sports. We are on Twitter at Skull King Sports. You can also find my fantasy football rankings not only on our website, skullkingsports.com, but you can also find my rankings at fantasypros.com, as I am part of their expert consensus on there. So those are the multiple different ways you can get a hold of us at Skull King.
Yeah, as far as we're concerned, you can listen to obviously fantasy football with Scott and Ryan Skolrud. We do this every year, and we plan to have Ryan back on the phone. You can to listen to this broadcast, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Let me repeat that back to you again. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be doing these future broadcasts on Zoom as well. We'll get to that in a moment. But to follow us on social media, you can do so at Tribune South. That's the at Tribune South. Facebook, South Florida Tribune, gets it done. Instagram, South Florida Tribune as well. the YouTube channel. I just alluded to that moments ago. South Florida Tribune. We will be doing more of these broadcasts through the YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune, via Zoom. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. Rick Curti does help us in the social media department there. We get content from our media distribution partners, as well as the broadcast can be on there, as well as our columnists, such as David Levitt. You can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And, of course, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Morgan Roth, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions, comments, or whatever, and provide them to all of our guests as well. So, any closing thoughts, Rick or Ryan, before we call it a night? And just so you know, this broadcast in the future, tonight is Tuesday, will be airing on Thursday night, but tonight was we decided to do it on Tuesday in advance of the Thursday night football game, featuring the Houston Texans and the defending Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs. Rick, any closing thoughts?
So I had a great time with you guys. Hope we can do it again. And people out there, just want to hope everybody be safe and wear a mask, wash your hands, social distance, and just use common sense.
Ryan?
I want to thank everyone for listening. I'm really excited about football season finally getting going. I'm ready for sports to be back and provide a little bit of distraction from the world around us, to be completely honest. So that's it for me.
Well, I'll tell you what, like I said, I've really enjoyed this broadcast, but now I think the next process with what we're going to do is I'm looking to visualize it, and we're going to be doing that soon enough. So on behalf of Ryan Skolrud and Rick Curti, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us here on our fantasy football show. Scott, with Ryan Skolrud, and of course we added the third man in the booth, Rick Curti. So good night, everybody, and have a great week one in the National Football League, a league that many of us probably thought wasn't even going to get started, but with the NFL's protocols in place, I'll tell you what, I have to admit, I'm pleasantly surprised that we'll probably see football so far, and I hope it stays that way, but time will tell. Good night, everybody. We'll catch you next week.